Hey there, Black Sheep. Welcome back to the channel. This week's episode looks a little different. I'm using Cartoon Me because even when I had COVID, I feel like you guys liked Cartoon Jana. So she may occasionally make some appearances. She's kind of cute. Happy Friday, and if you're new to the channel, welcome to this Friday's episode of This Bites. This Bites is a series in which we analyze the weekly study edition of the Watchtower and highlight how it implements the bite model. If you're unfamiliar with the bite model, it's the go-to method used to identify extreme control groups and cults, and the methods that they use to coerce, manipulate, recruit, and maintain control of members. This weekend, Jehovah's Witnesses will be going over study article number 37 in the September 2022 magazine. It's the first article in this magazine, and it's entitled, "You Can Trust Your Brothers." I'm instantly suspicious. Paragraph 1 does not ease you into the doom and gloom. It just jumps right in. People in Satan's world do not know whom they can trust. In the last days, men will be disloyal, slanderers, betrayers. In other words, people would reflect the personality of the God of this system of things, who is far from trustworthy. They want you to remember that the world is Satan's and that he is the God of this system of things. So anything outside of the Jehovah's Witness organization is unsafe. You are unsafe. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, deciding between good versus evil. Organize people into us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. Emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of the outside world, enemies. The world is bad, run by Satan, and you can't trust anyone in it. Paragraph 2 gives you a list of things that they say you can trust. We are confident that we can trust in Jehovah, Jesus, and the Bible. But some may wonder whether they can always trust the brothers and sisters in the congregation. No, the answer is no. It then asks, if the answer is yes, why can we trust them? The picture below is captioned, "We have trustworthy brothers and sisters around the world," and has like a stock photo image of, it's not stock photo, of a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses from different cultures just standing and posing and smiling for a picture, ready for their 8-hour-long indoctrination session. So it's not asking a question, this paragraph, it's telling you your brothers and sisters are trustworthy, and you're going to find out in this article. The article is going to prove to you why you should trust your brothers and sisters. I will say, I was at a Jehovah's Witness convention back in 2017. It was my last in-person convention where I was a believer. And after I washed my hands in the ladies' room, I accidentally left behind a ring by the sink, and it was a real sapphire. And when I finally got there, hundreds of people had used the bathroom at that point. And there were 6,000 people in attendance. So what was I expecting? It was gone. But when I went to the Lost and Found, it had been turned in. And as a PME JW, PME meaning physically and mentally in, I thought only Jehovah's people would turn in my ring. And I was so grateful to Jehovah. Emotional control. Teach emotion-stopping techniques to block feelings of doubt. Do you feel any distrust? Do you feel any doubt? Because the article says we are confident. Are you not confident? Are you not we? Are you other? Normally, I don't even address the subheadings to the paragraphs, but this subheading says, we need our brothers and sisters. The subheading alone is behavior control, instill dependency and obedience, thought control, change person's name and identity. In the Jehovah's Witness congregation, everyone is referred to as brother and sister, even children. And this is what I mean by changing a person's name or identity. Even though it is their surname or family name, what this is used to do is remove a sense of individuality. And paragraph 3 nicely illustrates that. It says, around the world, we have brothers and sisters who share our love for Jehovah and who try their best to live by his standards. Our language, culture, and dress may be different from theirs, but we feel close to them, even when meeting them for the first time. And this is true. They do feel close to them even when meeting for the first time. The reason they feel close is that they love bomb each other. One of the things that started my wake-up process was learning the term love bombing, because I was like, we do that. I do that. I will say I never had any ill intent when I was love bombing people. And I was rarely being fake about greeting them with enthusiasm. I was genuine because I was genuinely brainwashed. And so I won't say that the love that they're showing in their love bombing is all fake. I will say it is a product of design. The average JW, they don't realize that they're unwittingly trained to do the dirty work of the organization's leaders. Paragraph 4 asks why we need the brothers and sisters and gives 4 examples. The first 2 are basically the same. It says that they help carry burdens and encourage you. It says, they also encourage us to stay active in Jehovah's service and to keep spiritually strong. The paragraph then cites Hebrews 10:23 through 25, and this scripture is constantly used in Jehovah's Witness meetings and even by Jehovah's Witnesses in private if somebody is having a difficult time making the meetings or making the meetings on time, or even staying later after the meetings instead of immediately leaving for them. They're supposed to stick around for that good association. And so this scripture is often used to make sure that they value all of their meetings or indoctrination sessions. How are you going to stay spiritually strong if you're not a regular association being built up by your brothers and sisters? There used to be what they said was 5 meetings a week. If you are not a Jehovah's Witness or have never been a Jehovah's Witness, you're probably saying, well, that's a lot of stuff to cram into 1 week, especially if you're working a full-time job and maintaining a family and also expected to do personal study. This is taking up a lot of your time. Yes, it is. This is behavior control. Dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates. Behavior control. Major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. And going back to the paragraph, Jehovah's Witnesses are reminded more often about the fact that they have very dangerous enemies than the scripture about loving their neighbors and enemies. The paragraph reminds them by saying, think how we would feel if we did not have the protection of the congregation to help us stand firm against our common enemies, Satan the devil and his wicked world. This is othering. It's Jehovah's Witness versus Satan and his wicked world. You have common enemies. They are forcing this. They are forging this bond. You are brothers in arms. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, adopting the group's map of reality as reality. Instill black and white thinking, decide between good versus evil, organize people into us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. Emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation. And paragraph 4 is still not done with you. It continues to drive home that fear so that you realize your strength is in numbers. You need the brothers and sisters so that you can even stand a chance during the Great Tribulation that Jehovah's Witnesses believe is happening. It says, Satan and those whom he controls will soon attack God's servants. So be afraid. Be very afraid. Jehovah's Witnesses are taught that before the war of Armageddon, there will be a time of great tribulation, one that's worse than anything the world has ever seen. Call to mind literally any awful thing you can think of: the Holocaust, school church shootings, COVID death numbers. The Great Tribulation, it's worse. According to Jehovah's Witnesses, is going to be way worse than anything that you could even anticipate. And why do they harp on with this fear so much? It's because they use fear as a method of control. There's a quote from some old English philosopher, Mr. Edmund Burke, that says, "No passion so effectually robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as fear." If you're being ruled by fear, your powers of acting and reasoning are robbed from your mind. This is why they use fear as a tool. It's effective. Below, I'm going to link a slideshow from the Academy of Ideas. It's a slideshow on YouTube. It's a thoroughly researched video on fear and how it's used to control people and societies through propaganda. It does talk mostly about governments and social groups. However, if you listen to the principles and the ways in which these governments and social groups use fear, you'll see that it applies. You may see some similarities in the use of fear and repetition, which are favorite tools of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. But to wrap it up, if they can get you to be afraid for your life, you'll likely do anything to get to safety. They want their followers to be perpetually afraid so that Watchtower and the governing body are the only hope for safety and salvation. Moving right along, paragraph 5 is going to start easing us into some dangerously blind trust. It says some Jehovah's Witnesses may have trouble trusting because a fellow believer betrayed a confidence or failed to keep a promise, or perhaps someone in the congregation said or did something that hurt them deeply. So your feelings of distrust are based on a fact or your rationality and instinctual sense of self-protection and preservation, but they're going to talk you out of that. Paragraph 6 says, "Certainly then, we can be patient with our brothers if they say or do things that irritate or hurt us. We would not want to keep account of the injury, making a mental record of our brother's offenses for future reference. So, forgive and forget. Don't keep a mental record." Ephesians 4:26, "Do not let the sun set while you are still angry." This here puts the pressure on the wronged one. Say somebody hurt you, misused your trust, betrayed you. You're not meant to let the sun set while you're still angry. If you let the sun set while you're still angry, that is on you.
Jehovah saw what happened, he knows my pain. I realize that I can't hold on. Forgiveness means you don't bring it back. This only gets me in a rut. Jehovah, please help me. Help me forgive freely.
Did you catch that? Forgiveness means you don't bring it back up and you leave it in Jehovah's hands. But what we do see here is a child who was hurt and is meant to forgive. That's what I want you to take away from this. And not just forgive freely, but not to bring it back up. And what if you don't forgive freely? What if you're having a difficult time doing so? You know what? You need to let it go. Or take the opportunity to imitate Jehovah.
It's a simple fact that to be at peace with others, We must be willing to forgive. Imperfection exerts a powerful influence over us, sometimes robbing us of compassion. Jehovah asked Job to pray for the men who had tormented him. A chance to forgive is a chance to imitate Jehovah. We wouldn't want to miss that opportunity.
They're phrasing this so that it's on you. You have an opportunity to imitate Jehovah. Emotional control. Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Emotional control. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as you are not living up to your potential, your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish, and social guilt. Paragraphs 7 and 8 say, another aid in building trust is to see our brothers and sisters as Jehovah sees them. God loves them and does not keep track of their sins. Neither should we. Trigger warning. So the elder who was arrested in Pennsylvania and used his status in the congregation to hurt 9 children. 9 is keeping account of their sins. And according to this paragraph, you shouldn't be doing that. Jehovah's not keeping track of his sins, and you shouldn't either. Basically, Jehovah forgives, so what's your problem? It does say they're not encouraging blind trust. It does say that in the paragraph. We're not encouraging blind trust and that people should earn it. But it also says give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they do betray you, do not allow the actions of a few to discourage you from trusting your brother. So, behavior control. Discourage individualism, encourage groupthink. And I don't want the term groupthink, because it does come up in our discussions often. I don't want groupthink to become one of those buzzwords that we use, but we don't really understand the full context of. So here is the full definition. Is a psychological phenomenon that occurs within a group of people in which the desire for harmony or conformity in the group results in an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. Cohesiveness or the desire for cohesiveness in a group may produce a tendency among its members to agree at all costs. This causes the group to minimize conflict and reach a consensus decision without critical evaluation. The Jehovah's Witnesses recently just had an entire 3-day convention dedicated to pursuing peace. This is what the pursuit of peace at all costs and forgiving freely leads to. Paragraph 9 gives us an example of a Bible character, and the paragraph is meant to answer the questions: how did Hannah maintain trust in Jehovah's arrangement despite the shortcomings of some of his representatives? What does Hannah's experience teach you about trusting Jehovah's arrangement? This paragraph sets you up to forgive the brothers who are meant to be the ones in charge, the ones that have responsibilities and say over the congregation, from the governing body all the way down to the local elders. They make an example of Hannah and Eli. Eli, according to the Bible, was a high priest, and his sons also had positions of authority, but they were regularly engaging in immoral conduct. Hannah was crying and praying in the temple because of her childlessness, and Eli saw this and thought she was drunk and incoherent and criticized her openly in front of whoever was in the temple when she was doing this. So now not only is she having a tough time because she knows that the leaders are corrupt, but the head of the entire congregation basically has personally accused and insulted her. But it says, Hannah did not turn her back on God's arrangement by refusing to worship. As an abused person, an abused Jehovah's Witness in a congregation, Maybe this person hurt you. Maybe they hurt you physically, maybe they hurt you emotionally, maybe they hurt you sexually, but God hasn't punished them. No, they are standing right up there on the platform, behind the podium, giving a talk about morality. And you should not stop going to the meetings, even though it feels like justice has not been served. Because Hannah didn't do that. Hannah did not turn her back on God's arrangement by refusing to worship. And Jehovah took action in due time. He took his time. And it says that Hannah was rewarded for keeping her mouth shut, basically, and continuing to worship regardless of how corrupt Jehovah's arrangement was. Emotional control. Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Thought control. Forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy aloud. Basically, Hannah stayed quiet. She didn't talk to her other brothers and sisters in the congregation about how bad Eli's sons were. She wasn't murmuring or gossiping or how wrong it was that Eli said she was drunk and called her out in front of the entire whoever was in attendance when she was really just suffering. Instead of being compassionate, he criticized her. She didn't put her feelings in front of serving God. So you should also shut up and worship. Ignore those feelings and keep indoctrinating yourself. Paragraph 10, I didn't detect any bite model. It's just a story about David. Basically, it says that David was betrayed by someone he trusted, but that didn't stop him from trusting a different person, and that went well. So just because some people suck doesn't mean all people suck. Then paragraph 11, same message, but very different story. This one includes more murder. David asked Nabal to provide food for his men. Nabal was like, no. David said, fine, then we'll murder every man in your house. And Nabal's servant, desperate for his life, went to Nabal's wife, Abigail, and was like, can you please talk some sense into your husband, because he's about to get himself and all the men in this house murdered. So it's basically saying that Nabal's servant didn't necessarily trust Nabal to make the best decision, but he did trust Nabal's wife. So in short, again, some people suck, but others might not. Then, of course, it uses Jesus, the example of all examples. Can't be a Christian without being Christ-like. So it gives an example of Jesus forgiving. It says that he forgave his disciples over and over. It says Jesus did not question their motives for serving Jehovah or remove them as apostles. His confidence in these imperfect men was not misplaced. All of them served faithfully until the end of their earthly course. This is encouraging Jehovah's Witnesses that their brothers in charge are imperfect, but Jesus didn't give up on imperfect men, and so you shouldn't either. Imperfect men can be in charge and not removed, like it says. Jehovah didn't remove them as apostles. So the brothers taking the lead, the elders in your congregation who make the rules and set the times and give you counsel and tell you when you and your family are deficient or not, they, despite being imperfect, they're not going to be removed from their position, potentially. Right now, there's a high-profile case of 4 Jehovah's Witness elders arrested for multiple offenses, rape, child abuse, and these aren't apostate lies. It's not coming from me. It's coming from the Pennsylvania Attorney General, I believe now governor. And I'm not saying any of it. I don't know this man. He doesn't know me. And here's the news report.
The 19 victims and 4 men who are being charged with sexually violating them are all members of the Jehovah's Witness organization. Most of these defendants use their faith and church to gain access to their victims, to build their trust, and then molested them. She reported this abuse to her mother and to other members of her community. Through the documents obtained during our investigation, we obtained a summary of a meeting where Elam told others that the accounts of sexual assault must be true if she said them because, quote, his daughter does not lie.
I imagine the brothers and sisters in those congregations are going to struggle with imitating Jesus by forgiving these imperfect brothers who took the lead. These were elders in the congregation. It doesn't say that they knew each other necessarily, but these were the ones in charge of the congregation, that these reports were made against them to other elders in the congregation, and yet they continued to serve in their spiritual position. Be like Jesus. Forgive. They're imperfect. It's all rather graphic, but if you want to hear further, to know I'm not editing things out of context, the link to the full news report is below. Paragraph 13. Once, a sister confided a personal matter to an elder. The next day, the elder's wife called to encourage the sister, obviously knowing what was told to the elder in confidence. Understandably, the sister's trust in the elder was shaken. To her credit, though, the sister reached out for help. She approached another elder, and he helped her to rebuild her trust in the elders. Information control. Encourage spying on other members. Impose a buddy system to monitor and control members. Report deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership. Ensure that individual behavior is monitored by the group. This is why they encourage you to turn to the elders. Because if you're having those deviant thoughts, feelings, if you're having doubts, if you're depressed, they want to know why, so that they can maintain the peace and control and appearance of the congregation. Paragraph 14. Satan is the enemy, not our brothers. The brother gave that statement considerable prayerful thought, and he was eventually able to make peace with both elders. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, instill black and white thinking, decide between good versus evil, organize people into us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. This is just to remind you that Satan is the enemy. Who's the enemy? Satan's the enemy. Who's the enemy? Not our brothers, just everyone who's not our brothers. Who's everyone that's not our brothers? Possibly unbelieving family members and our school teachers and our workmates. Remember who the enemy is. In paragraph 15, it asks the question, have you ever lost a privilege? That can be a painful experience. So sometimes when Jehovah's Witnesses sin, they will have their privileges taken away. And this is decided on by a group of elders or a judicial committee, as they're called. And some people take this personally, especially when they know that some of the brothers may have a past or done or gotten away with something. For those who aren't Jehovah's Witness, privileges include things like going out in the door-to-door ministry. That's a privilege. It's expected of you, but it's also a privilege. Raising your hand and answering during the meetings or giving demonstrations, expected of you, but also a privilege. Going to congregation gatherings, that's not necessarily expected of you, but like say someone were having a get-together with snacks and music, that's a privilege that can be taken away from you. That's the end of the list for women Jehovah's Witnesses. For men, they get a bit more. So they get that plus things like carrying the microphones, giving public talks, directing traffic. When privileges get taken away, there's usually an announcement. So all the rest of the congregation knows that you messed up, and that's why your privileges are getting taken away. Behavior control. Rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. For this example, paragraph 15 uses Greta or Gret. During World War II, it says that she came from a divided household, which in Jehovah's Witness terms means that her dad was opposed to his wife and daughter being in a cult, and her mother and her were firmly and thoroughly indoctrinated. So when the brothers or elders found out about her dad, they lost trust in her and her mother with the magazines. And she lost privileges for something that wasn't even her fault. It says, Gret said that it took a long time for her to forgive and to trust those brothers again. In time, though, she acknowledged that Jehovah must have forgiven them, so she should too. You heard that? Jehovah has forgiven them, so you should too. This is very dangerous and harmful rhetoric. Paragraph 16. If you have had a similar disheartening experience, work to rebuild your trust. You may need time, but your efforts will be worth it. One bad meal will not make us stop eating. Focus on what we can do to contribute to the atmosphere of trust in our congregation. Thought control. Encourage only good and proper thoughts. Emotional control. Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Emotional control. Manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. Remember that definition of groupthink? This causes the group to minimize conflict and reach a consensus decision without critical evaluation. Cohesiveness, or the desire for cohesiveness in a group, may produce a tendency among its members to agree at all costs. And what did the paragraph say? It said, focus on what we can do to contribute to the atmosphere of trust in our congregation. So maybe somebody is untrustworthy. Maybe they are doing despicable things. But focus on what you can do. You can forgive. You cannot go to bed angry. You cannot gossip. You cannot stop going to the meetings. You cannot insist on being heard. You cannot insist on justice, because you would not be pursuing peace or the atmosphere of trust in the congregation. Paragraph 17, the final paragraph, cycles back to the messages of paragraph 1 and 2. Behavior control, instill dependency and obedience. Emotional control, instill fear, such as fear of the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation. It says, trust is rare in Satan's world, but trust based on love permeates our worldwide brotherhood. Such trust contributes to our joy and unity now and will be a protection as we face difficult times ahead. So just remember, the world's run by Satan. You need your brothers and sisters. You must forgive them freely. Don't bring it up. Shut up and worship. And maybe you'll survive Armageddon. So that's the cheery end of the article. Let's tally up the score. We have 6 for behavior control, 1 for information control, 6 for thought control, and 9 for emotional control. That brings us a grand total of 6,169. A number that means just as much as some of your elders' words. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you enjoyed our time here and found the information helpful, please give this video a like, leave me a comment, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you'll be alerted every Friday when we take a bite out of the next Watchtower article. Continue thinking freely, black sheep. Bye.